Pancake, everyone. What do you think will happen to an astronaut who is lost in outer space? And is it real at all? Today we're going to tell you about it. A terrible day for the Challenger. Almost 33 years ago, on January 28, 1986, there was a major disaster in the history of manned spaceflight. The shuttle Challenger crashed on launch. On board were two military pilots, two engineers, a physicist, an astronaut, and a teacher. Each of the 73 seconds of the shuttle flight of the deceased mission STS-51L has been looked at many times by experts. The exact cause of the astronaut's death remains a mystery, but experts tend to believe the astronauts were still alive when the cabin hit the ocean at over 199 miles per hour. Their death was a tragedy not only for the United States, but also for the entire world. Moreover, it shattered the faith of hundreds of people in the safety of space missions. On January 28, 1986, US President Ronald Reagan announced to American citizens that the shuttle Challenger had exploded in the atmosphere. The disaster was hard felt by the whole country. Reagan expressed his sympathies to the relatives of the victims, but still noted that such expeditions and discoveries cannot be imagined without significant fatal risks for the testers. So what happened after all? The Challenger was due to take off on January 24, 1986, but because of a dust storm at Senegal Airport, the site of a possible emergency landing, the flight was postponed. During a morning check of the shuttle's condition, the rounders couldn't help but notice icicles hanging from the bottom. On the night of January 27-28, it was colder than 28 degrees Fahrenheit. This fact could not go unnoticed by the developers of the solid propellant boosters for the shuttle. In such climatic changes, the fiber of the intersection seals was losing its elasticity. It also could not provide sufficient sealing at the joints of the ship's sections. Specialists immediately reported their concerns to NASA. On the night of January 28, under pressure from representatives of the Marshall Center, modern theatrical management gave guarantees that the damage to the seals was no more critical than on previous missions. Such levity has cost not only the lives of 7 astronauts and the failure of the mission, the launch of which cost $1.3 billion, but also led to a freeze on the space shuttle program for 3 long years. The commission, which analyzed all the evidence, decided that the main cause of the disaster should be considered flaws in the corporate culture and decision-making procedures of NASA. Almost immediately after launch, gray smoke emerged from the junction of the tail and second sections of the space system's right solid rocket booster. This was due to the formation of an ice crust. In the 59th second, at full speed, the shuttle had a fiery tail. Both the flight commander and the mission control center had time to take emergency action, but Francis Scooby, the ship's commander, failed to see and assess the danger in time, and the flight controllers were probably just afraid to take full responsibility. In the 65th second of the flight, a fuel leak began due to an ignition of the fuel tank. In the 73rd second of flight, the lower right booster strut broke off, and tilting, the hull itself tore off the Challenger's right wing and punctured the oxygen tank. These led to an explosion. The components of liquid hydrogen and oxygen mixed and ignited, creating a ball of flame in the air. The shuttle itself was still gaining altitude, but was no longer controllable. When the fuel tank collapsed, the shuttle could no longer gain altitude. The tail, both wings, and part of the engine separated. The blast wave tore off the front of the Challenger, where the crew was, and it soared 20 kilometers upwards. The deck continued its fall with 4 living astronauts. In an attempt to save themselves, they used backup breathing devices. The entire bow of the ship separated from the ship's hull, and the heavy structure of the shuttle collapsed into the water. The conclusion of the NASA medics is that the crew may have lost consciousness because of the loss of pressure in the module during the flight. After the crash, the US government began an emergency search for the debris of the shuttle in the ocean. Even a nuclear submarine took part in the search. NASA lost about $8 billion. Flights were carried out from April 12, 1981 to July 21, 2011. A total of 5 shuttles were built. The Columbia burned up during atmospheric braking before landing in 2003. The Challenger crashed during launch in 1986. Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour. Also, a prototype ship, the Enterprise, was built canceled in 1975, but it was never launched into space. A repeat of the Shuttle Columbia scenario. It crashed on landing on February 1, 2003. It had 7 crew members aboard, all of whom died. On January 16, 2003, as the Shuttle Columbia was climbing into orbit, a piece of rocket cladding slammed into the front of the wing with devastating force. High-speed camera footage showed a piece of heat-resistant foam tearing away from the cladding into the wing. Then, after examining the footage, scientists concluded that these may have damaged the integrity of the heat shield, but a detailed analysis was not carried out. Human negligence again interfered with the space mission. When the Columbia entered the zone of the heaviest loads during landing, the heat shield at the point of damage began to crumble. That part of the wing had landing gear. The tires exploded from overheating, a powerful jet of red-hot gas hit, and the wing completely collapsed. Following this, the entire ship began to fall apart. Without the wing, the Columbia spun and lost control. Only 41 seconds elapsed between the beginning of the cockpit collapse and the death of the crew. A second major catastrophe finally undermined the credibility of the space shuttle program, and it was shut down. On July 21, 2011, the Atlantis spacecraft completed the last expedition in the history of the project. Since that period, the single-use Russian Soyuz has been the only guide for astronauts to the ISS. The space shuttle Columbia went into space 28 times. It spent 300.74 days in space, made 4,808 revolutions around the Earth during that time, and flew a total of 125.2 million miles. Many experiments in chemistry, medicine, and biology were conducted aboard the shuttle. And while we're experimenting in search of topics for our new videos, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like it, and click on the bell so you don't miss our exciting new videos. Destroyed Soyuz. The first disaster with human victims in the history of astronautics was the death of the pilot, Vladimir Komarov, during the landing of the Soviet Soyuz 1. Everything went wrong from the start. Soyuz 1 was supposed to dock with Soyuz 2 to bring back the crew of the first spacecraft. But the launch of the second ship was cancelled because of malfunction. When the ship was already in orbit, the solar panel malfunction was detected. The commander was ordered to return to Earth. The pilot practically tried to land by hand. In total, more than 350 people died during space launches and test service, including in the atmospheric layer, 170 astronauts alone. The landing proceeded normally, but at the last stage of landing, the main braking parachute did not open. The reserve parachute opened, but got tangled in the lines and the ship crashed into the ground at 164 feet per second. The hydrogen peroxide tanks exploded and the cosmonaut died instantly. Soyuz 1 burned to the ground. The body of the pilot burned so badly that experts had difficulty identifying fragments. After the incident, further implementation of the program of manned launches of Soyuz spacecraft was postponed for 18 months. There were many modifications of the construction. Imperfection of the technology of opening of the braking parachute was called the official cause of the accident. The next lost Soyuz was the Soyuz 11. The purpose of the crew of the spacecraft was to dock with the orbital station Salyut 1 and to carry out a series of works on board. The crew accomplished their tasks within 11 days. When the crew detected a serious fire, the spacecraft was ordered to return to Earth. All processes, re-entry, both braking and landing, were flawless, but the crew stubbornly failed to communicate with the Mission Control Center. By the time the ship's hatch was opened, all crew members were already dead. They were victims of the compression sickness. When the ship depressured at high altitude, the pressure dropped sharply to lethal levels. Decompression sickness is a disease that occurs when the pressure of inhaled air decreases. Gases enter the bloodstream in the form of bubbles, causing the blood vessels and cell walls to collapse and leading to blockage of blood flow. No spacesuits were provided in the spacecraft design. Decompression sickness is followed by unbearable pain, and the cosmonauts simply could not report a failure. After this tragic accident, all Soyuz spacecraft were equipped with spacesuits in case of emergency. The first space accident. Yes, you heard right. The first space accident happened in 2009. two satellites collided. According to the official statement of the Iridium Company, which was distributed among news agencies, Iridium-33 collided with the Russian satellite Cosmos 2251. The latter was launched from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome back in 1993 and stopped working 2 years later. Of course, not all accidents that have happened in space have resulted in loss of life. In 1971, a Soyuz 10 spacecraft with an expedition for a 24-day stay in orbit was launched to the Salyut orbital station. During docking, the spacecraft was found to have a damaged docking unit, and the cosmonauts were unable to board the station and return to Earth. And just 4 years later, in 1975, the Soyuz spacecraft failed to enter orbit to dock with the Salyut 4 spacecraft. There was an accident during the activation of the third stage of the rocket. Soyuz landed in Altai, near the border with China and Mongolia. Cosmonauts Vasily Lazarev and Oleg Makarov were found the next day. One of the most recent failed flight experiences is the accident that happened on October 11, 2018. It occurred during the launch of the Soyuz FG launch vehicle with the Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft. 9 minutes after the launch, the control center received a message about a failure. The crew made an emergency landing. The reasons for the accident are still being investigated. It is possible that the engines of the second stage have failed. The Russian-American crew evacuated in an escape capsule. Space disasters also happen on Earth, taking many more lives. We are talking about accidents during rocket launches. On March 18, 1980, a Vostok rocket was being prepared for launch at the Plesetsk Cosmodrome. The rocket was filled with various fuels: nitrogen, kerosene, and liquid oxygen. While pouring hydrogen peroxide into the fuel tank, 300 tons of fuel detonated. The terrible fire took the lives of 44 people. 4 more died of burns, and 39 people were injured. The commission blamed the Cosmodrome employees who were negligent in maintaining the rocket. Only 16 years later, an independent investigation was carried out. As a result, the cause was revealed: the use of hazardous materials in the construction of fuel filters for hydrogen peroxide. A similar tragedy happened in 2003 in Brazil at the Alcantara launch site. The rocket exploded on the launch pad during final tests, killing 21 people and injuring 20 others. The rocket was Brazil's third failed attempt to send a research satellite into space. Soviet designer and father of national cosmonautics, Sergei Pavlovich Korolev, said, "Cosmonautics has an infinite future, and its prospects are as infinite as the universe itself. Humanity is already living in anticipation of flights to Mars, the first of which is scheduled for 2030. And the safety of the space industry is an important consideration in the development of this mission." Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like and comment. Maybe some of you know more details about these disasters. Share it below. Thank you all for watching. We wish you a pancake mood and see you all again.